Crucible of the Vampire. Written by Amanda Murray. Narrated by Gemma Lawrence. Chapter 6. Hidden Places. Isabelle pushed open the back door and felt the warmth of the sun on her face. It was a very pleasant change from the cold, dark cellar she'd been spending most of her time in the last few days. She stood for a few moments outside in the daylight, breathing in the fresh air and enjoying the wide-open countryside views in front of her. The gardens at the rear of the hall were designed in a series of shallow terraces that ran down the westerly side of the house. Wide stone steps were set in the middle, and a gravel pathway connected to the formal lawns at the front. Behind this, through a tall hedge, were the greenhouses, orchard and vegetable beds that were Robert's domain. The winter rain and spring sunshine had turned the grass a jewelled green. In the distance, Isabelle could see the outline of the Welsh hills, topped with a frosting of white snow. She looked over when she heard the sound of footsteps and the creak of a wheelbarrow. "Hello again. How are you this fine day?" said Robert jovially, sauntering along the path, balancing a pile of twigs and tools in the wheelbarrow. "OK, thanks. Just on my way to the village." "Not going back to the pub, are you?" "No, just to make a phone call." Robert came to a halt and put down the wheelbarrow. He took a couple of steps towards Isabelle, glancing around nervously and lowering his tone so as not to be overheard. "I'm sorry I left. I heard about what happened. You must have been terrified. I'm surprised Tom did that, to be honest." "You know who that lad is, then?" Isabelle looked intrigued, and Robert nodded, plunging his hands in his pockets of his corduroy trousers. "Oh, yeah. You remember that story I told you about the previous gardener? Well, that's Tom's dad." "So that's why he was looking at us like that." "You can imagine the whole episode messed him up pretty well. He's been getting into all sorts of trouble ever since. Of course, I've never been his favourite person, as I took his dad's job. He's always had it in for Carl, too. Blames him for the accident, because it happened on Carl's land." "I see. I thought there was history there." "Oh yeah, plenty. Tom will tell anyone who'll listen that Carl is responsible for his dad's death. Anyway, as you probably realised, you don't want to get on the wrong side of Carl." "Yes, I gathered that. He can be quite forceful. He has a bit of a reputation locally. Just be careful around him. You've seen what he can do." Robert glanced at Isabelle. A serious look crossed his face. "You take care." Isabelle watched him go, wheelbarrow and tools clanking until he disappeared round the back of the house. She then began to head off down the long drive towards the village, looking thoughtful. It really was the perfect day for a walk. The sun was out, everything had started to bloom. The leaves were beginning to thicken on the trees, and she could hear the sound of returning birds. The village was only about a mile away from the hall. Originally, when the estate had been built, it would have doubtless owned all the land around, including the village and its smattering of small cottages and outlying farms. Over the years, land had been sold off as families lost much of their wealth, either through bad business investments or inheritance tax or a mixture of both. A high grey stone wall marked out the boundary of the estate, and Isabelle followed the path next to this for about a quarter of a mile before turning left towards the village. The traditional red telephone box was tucked away in a corner before the road branched off at a right angle. She was surprised that it was still in good working order. After all, nobody used telephone boxes anymore. Almost everyone, except the Scott Mortons, of course, had mobiles. She dialed the university number. Thankfully, the professor was in. She was surprisingly pleased to hear his voice. "Hello, Professor. It's Isabelle." No, I've got it out of the ground." "Well, I think so. Metallurgically speaking, it's a match, and the inscriptions are the same." "Yes. The aging looks genuine, not chemical, but it's going to be different as this piece has been in the ground." "Yes." Well, that's why I'm ringing. We've got a problem. Hugo Edwards was sitting at his desk, paperwork strewn out in front of him, a ham sandwich half eaten by the phone. He fiddled distractedly with his fountain pen as he listened. He rolled his eyes and sighed when Isabelle explained the dilemma. What he didn't want at this point in time was a problem. He was already late with his funding report, and the last thing he needed was someone like Mr. Scott Morton causing him grief. Well, what does he think you're going to do? Steal it? How ridiculous. All right, Isabelle, you're the one on the ground. What's your instinct? I don't know. Well, if you're sure. All right, I suppose so. I'll get it sent up immediately. The sooner we know one way or another, the better. OK, see you in a day or two. Good luck. Professor Edwards put the receiver down, sighed, and shook his head disbelievingly. My God. The world really is full of money-grabbing idiots. Isabelle lay in bed, restless, unable to sleep. The moon was casting its white shadow through the thin curtains and created an eerie atmosphere in the room. She tossed and turned, and finally got up to go to the bathroom. Inside the cubicle, Isabelle heard a creaking of floorboards. She shivered. As she sat there, she saw the feet again under the door. But these weren't the same feet as before, when she'd seen them on her first night at the hall. These feet weren't as pale. Scarlett? Isabelle called quietly. The feet disappeared, but as she came out of the toilet cubicle and went to wash her hands, she found Scarlett leaning provocatively against the wall by the wash basin. Her long blonde hair gleamed in the fluorescent light, and her silky Japanese black and red dressing gown was open at the neck, revealing a flimsy lace top skimming her breasts. She wore a delicate gold chain with the letter S that quivered very slightly as her neck pulsed rhythmically. She watched Isabelle, a mischievous smile on her red lips, her eyes following her as she walked towards the wash basin. Why are you creeping about? Isabelle was getting just a little annoyed. She was tired, her nerves frayed. She didn't understand Scarlett at all, and she certainly wasn't in the mood for games. But Scarlett ignored the question and continued to stare at Isabelle provocatively. Do you like me dressed like this? She was standing only a few feet away from Isabelle. As she said this, she slid open one side of her satin dressing gown. Isabelle looked at Scarlett's long, smooth-skinned leg and towards her hip, where she glimpsed a pair of pale green silky knickers edged with black lace. Her underwear! She hadn't realised they'd been missing until now, and what the hell was Scarlett doing wearing them? Seen enough? Scarlett simpered and laughed in a burlesque fashion. Isabelle, embarrassed and shocked, stormed towards the bathroom door, avoiding any eye contact with her. Are you blushing? Scarlett teased as Isabelle pushed past. She seemed to get a thrill out of provoking her. It's cute when you do that. For Scarlett, there were no rules, no boundaries. All her life, she'd only ever had to think of herself and what she wanted. She was enjoying having Isabelle around, someone at last to play with. I'm going to bed now, Isabelle replied huffily, making no attempt to hide her irritation at Scarlett's goading. Despite her annoyance, she couldn't help glancing again at Scarlett's leg, still visible through her satin robe. Isabelle felt a momentary stab of desire. Scarlett looked triumphantly at the flustered Isabelle. She watched her like a cat eyeing up its prey, her provocative expression undaunted by Isabelle's hasty retreat. Isabelle almost ran back down the corridor to her room. Her strange encounter with Carl Scott Morton's daughter had unnerved her, and yet there was something compelling about the beautiful, icy-cold Scarlett. Is this what being incarcerated in a big old dusty house did to you? She was unconventional, illogical, unpredictable, all the things that were opposite to Isabelle. She had half expected Scarlett to follow her into her room, but she didn't. Isabelle spent a while writing in her diary, trying to process what was happening and how she felt, though she didn't want to explore that too much, and the written words all felt a little empty. Scarlett playing with her was the last thing she needed with the day she'd had. Who did she think she was, behaving like that? Isabelle's annoyance grew. And wearing my knickers? Her mind flashed back to the sight of Scarlett, her gown open. She thought of the silky material against her skin, something of hers rubbing against Scarlett's softest place. Her annoyance turned to arousal. It felt so wrong to be thinking of another woman like this, but Isabelle just couldn't stop herself. "Ah, what is this girl doing to me?" she raged to herself. It was some time before Isabelle finally managed to fall into a deep, peaceful sleep. The night was calm, and Isabelle's room was bathed in blue moonlight. Something or someone was moving around downstairs, although Isabelle was oblivious. It climbed the stairs and scurried silently along the landing, approaching Isabelle's bedroom and slowly opening the door. Isabelle slept soundly, but beneath her bed lay someone else. Someone with long tangled blonde hair and a pale white face. After a few moments, a deathly pale girl slowly rose from the foot of Isabelle's bed. She moved, ghost-like, soundlessly towards the window, and stood staring at Isabelle with her hollow, cavern-like eyes, bright in the gloomy darkness. Isabelle, sensing something, stirred from her dreams and slowly opened her eyes. Still half asleep, she started to focus on the figure in the room. Realizing that she was not alone, Isabelle suddenly jolted into wakefulness and sat bolt upright in bed. Too afraid to scream, she watched the woman turn and almost glide towards the door. The figure stopped at the door and turned back to stare at Isabelle with her empty eyes, and then, just as suddenly as she'd arrived, she was gone. Isabelle, terrified, stared at the blackness and remained in bed, clutching the duvet, trying to work out what or who she'd just seen. She'd been having strange, disturbing dreams since the moment she arrived at this place, but this somehow felt quite real. A thought crossed her mind. Was Scarlett playing her stupid games again? She'd been toying with her since the day she'd arrived, and now she'd just about had enough. Isabelle threw back the covers. She pulled on her dressing gown and, looking annoyed, she stomped towards the bedroom door. Marching along the corridor and without stopping to knock, she barged into Scarlett's room and stood with her hands on her hips. "Do you think that was funny?" Scarlett was sitting in bed reading. A small lamp cast its orange glow across the sheets. She still had her satin dressing gown on, and it was obvious she'd not been asleep. Scarlett looked Isabelle up and down in mild amusement, more than a little entertained to see Isabelle in her room at night. A naughty, mischievous smile formed on her lips. "Have you been having nightmares? Bad dreams are common in this house," Scarlett purred, her voice mesmerizing, placating. Isabelle began to calm down. Scarlett's soothing tone was having an effect on her. Had she been a little confused? Maybe she'd been having a bad dream after all. Now that she'd stopped to think about it, she felt somewhat embarrassed at storming into Scarlett's room. She was, after all, there on business. "I thought I saw someone in my room. I thought it was you." Scarlett's expression seemed to be having a calming, almost hypnotic effect on her. "Why don't you get into my bed?" Scarlett suggested, pulling back the covers and patting the bed appeasingly. Isabelle looked uncertain, but after a few moments she sat down gingerly on the edge of the bed and cautiously slid in beside Scarlet, innately feeling that a barrier had somehow been crossed. "You could sleep with me if you wanted." Scarlet simpered suggestively, but the entendre was lost on Isabelle, who, despite being unsure, was beginning to feel just a little bit grateful for the company. Scarlet quickly pulled up the covers and drew nearer to Isabelle. She was close enough that she could detect Scarlet's fragrance. "Have you been seeing shadows in your room?" Scarlet was almost mocking. Isabelle looked away, not sure she should be there and not wanting to acknowledge her fear. Something was transfixing her to the spot, so she was unable to move away. "The best thing to help you sleep is to listen to a nice, scary ghost story." Isabelle looked doubtful, but didn't move as Scarlet edged closer towards her. She could feel the warmth of Scarlet's body next to hers, the smell of her perfume intoxicating. "I used to love them when I was growing up. Come here, I'll tell you a story." Scarlet felt Isabelle begin to relax. She reached out and put her arm over Isabelle's shoulders and pulled her closer. "It's a story about a girl just like you. She was in a house with lots of rooms. There were lots of hidden places, just like here. She was an inquisitive girl who wanted to know things. Clever, just like you, Isabelle. I think she even looked a little bit like you." Scarlet felt Isabelle lie back a little more against the soft pillows, and sensing her relax, continued in her hypnotic, mesmerizing voice. "She was all alone in the house, trapped like a bird in a cage. She lay in bed feeling scared because there was nobody out there. She heard noises too, and one night she decided to take a look, because she was brave, just like you." Scarlet moved gently towards Isabelle. She could feel Scarlet's warm breath on her face, and she half turned away, aware of their closeness. She was afraid of the intimacy, and yet she felt compelled to stay, as if an unseen force was holding her there. Scarlet continued with her story. "She went out all alone to see what was out there, because there was something out there, something evil that hated the girl. It watched her as she walked around all alone. It could see her, but she couldn't see it. Isn't that scary, Isabelle? Imagine that, walking all on your own in the dark with someone behind you, but you didn't know they were there, ready to jump on you at any moment." Scarlet slowly reached over and lightly touched Isabelle on the shoulder. Her finger traced the line of her nightdress until she came to the undulation of her breast, where she gently caressed her skin. Isabelle looked down at where Scarlet's hand was touching her and thought about pushing her away, but Scarlet stopped her hands. Leaning in, she continued, their lips getting closer. Scarlet's hand slipped under the sheets and moved caressingly over Isabelle's thigh, slowly up her leg, reaching between her legs. Isabelle, both scared, confused, and aroused all at the same time, looked at Scarlet questioningly. "You couldn't do anything about it. If it wanted you, it could just take you." Scarlet's fingers moved, circling under the duvet, and Isabelle reacted to the pleasure she felt. "All over you, that overpowering evil." Isabelle and Scarlet looked at each other and began to kiss passionately. Her mouth felt so much softer than the boy's she'd known. Scarlet's hand continued to move, rubbing against her rhythmically. She sensed that Isabelle was close to her climax. Imagine how that would feel. Irresistible. Scarlet began kissing Isabelle's neck and heard her moan with pleasure from her touch. Isabelle looked into Scarlet's eyes, not knowing how she should feel, before quickly turning away. All those weeks of pent-up emotion suddenly finding an avenue of release. It was frightening, but tantalizingly thrilling at the same time. Scarlet continued to kiss her neck softly before pulling away. Her eyes glinted red. Isabelle had her eyes closed, lost in the moment and the intensity of desire. Just as she reached the height of her arousal, Scarlet went to kiss Isabelle's neck again, but this time as she opened her mouth, 2 sharp fangs were exposed, white against her red lips. With a gratified sigh, Scarlet sank her teeth into Isabelle's skin. The hand between her legs seemed to be holding her whole body in place. Scarlet had complete control over her. Her other hand pulled on her long hair, exposing her neck to Scarlet, who fed on it greedily. For a moment Isabelle thought she should stop her, but she was completely taken up in the moment. The pain fused with the pleasure, and Isabelle felt the most exquisite sensation flow through her body. It was like the sun hitting her skin on the beach. The imagined bright light illuminated the whole room in white. The moisture seemed to flow out of her. But this was not like the usual orgasm she had half guiltily experienced on her own. Something was different. She felt as though she were being drained by Scarlet. She began to panic. What is happening to me? I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be doing this. She tried to break free of Scarlet's embrace, but her strength was too much. She held her in place, her mouth seemingly attached to her neck, sucking gently and rhythmically, in time with her hand stroking Isabelle's softest place. Isabelle opened her eyes wide, the mixture of pain and pleasure intoxicating and overwhelming. Giving in to the multitude of sensations, she fell back on the bed, while Scarlet sucked eagerly from her neck. Scarlet, Her words were lost in the sound of Scarlet moaning in pleasure and the gentle rocking of the bed. It was as if she could no longer move. Her eyes slowly closed, and she floated away into a peaceful, velvety blackness.